This is the upgrade you need for your PS5, the Samsung 980 Pro with heatsink. This video is sponsored by Samsung. The PS5 is a great machine, but one of the biggest issues I have with it is that out of the box, the storage space is relatively tiny, especially if you compare it to the competition. So out of the box, the onboard SSD has 825 gigabytes of space on it, but after you consider the fact that the OS takes up space, you really only have 667.2 usable gigabytes to store games on your console. When you compare it to the 500 gigabytes that you used to get with the PS4, it seems like a pretty decent upgrade, but then when you realize that games are getting bigger and bigger, that space runs out quick. So that's where this comes in, the Samsung 980 Pro with the heatsink. That's very important for the PS5. If you are getting this SSD, you need to make sure it's the one with the heatsink. So when Samsung reached out to sponsor a video here on the channel, I was actually pretty excited because I use Samsung drives a lot when it comes to work. And my computer at home, I have a Samsung SSD and I use Samsung external SSDs when I'm editing videos. So this one kind of seemed like a no-brainer. Now the PS5 itself, if you guys haven't heard, runs pretty hot, and that's why you're gonna want this SSD, because not only does it have the required heatsink, the heatsink itself also has software built in that really helps with heat dissipation, because if there's one thing you don't want is to install an SSD into your PS5 that's gonna make it even hotter. So the drive I have right here is 1 terabyte, but you can actually get a 2 terabyte version of this drive, which is huge. That's gonna increase your storage a ton. And this thing is lightning fast with a 7,000 megabyte per second read speed and a 5,100 megabyte per second write speed. Basically, if you're not a numbers person, that means it's within the specific requirements that the PS5 has for installing your own SSD, which is important. And the biggest reason you're gonna want an SSD with an efficient heatsink like this one is that if your console does overheat, you're gonna have to turn it off and wait a while till it cools down until you can play games again. And no one wants to deal with that. But with all that basic info out of the way, let's go install this thing in my PS5. And if you wanna grab one for yourself before you start this whole process, there's one link down in the description. So the first thing you're going to wanna do is make sure your console is completely turned off. Not in rest mode, completely powered down so you can unplug it and make sure it's not connected to your TV or the wall or anything like that. Once you've got your console completely powered off and unplugged, make sure you have it set horizontally so that the disk drive side of it is facing up. Now getting this side plate off is actually a lot less tricky than it looks. So you're gonna take your right hand and put it in the back right corner of the PS5's plate, and then you're gonna put your left hand in the middle on the left side of the plate. You're gonna pull back with your left hand and pull up with your right hand, and after a few seconds the plate should just pop right off. Once you've got the side plate off, it's actually pretty obvious where the SSD goes because there's an SSD shaped door right next to the big fan. At the top of that door you'll see a Phillips head screw, and you'll know it's the right one because it actually has the PlayStation button symbols on the screw itself, which is awesome. Once you unscrew that screw and pop the door off, you're ready to install your Samsung 980 Pro. Now when you're looking at the SSD slot on your console, you're going to see a screw and a little spacer. Unscrew the screw and make sure you grab that and the spacer, and do not lose them because they're going to be important in just a few seconds. When you're looking at the green part of the SSD slot, you're going to see a few different holes. Locate the one that has an 80 on it because that's where we're going to put the little spacer so that once we plug in the SSD, it'll just screw right into the slot it needs to. Next, after you've double checked that your Samsung 980 Pro has a heatsink, plug it into the slot and make sure that the little notch on the end of the drive lines up with the notch in the port. Now this thing's gonna go in at a sort of 45-degree angle, and that means you've done it right. It'll just slide in all on its own. You gotta give a little pressure, but it's pretty easy. Next, what you're going to want to do is push down the end of the SSD that's sticking up so it lies flat, and then gently screw the screw into that little metal spacer so that it's firm but not too tight. Now your SSD is installed in the PS5. So basically what you're going to do is reverse everything we just did. So take that silver door that was on top of the SSD slot, put it back into place and screw it back in with that Phillips head screw that has all the PlayStation button symbols on it. After that, grab the side plate that you took off your PS5 and you'll notice that there's sort of like hooks on one side of it, and you're going to want to slide it back on in the opposite way that it popped off. Like those hooks should go into the holes on the side of the PS5. It sounds a little confusing, but when you're watching it happen, it makes a lot of sense. Now, if you've done everything correctly, which let's be real, you probably did because this isn't too complicated at all, when you boot up your PS5, you'll see a screen screen that says M.2 SSD storage at the top left. The first line of that screen should read, "To use your M.2 SSD, you need to format it." At the bottom of the screen, you'll see "Don't format and turn off PS5," and then the other option will be "Format M.2 SSD." We're gonna click Format M.2 SSD. Once you select that format option, it'll take you to the next screen and you'll see a progress bar that says formatting, and once that's done, you're pretty much ready to go. Now, even though you just installed a ton more storage into your PS5 with your Samsung 980 Pro, it's still going to default to the onboard storage. If you want to make it so that your PS5 defaults to the drive you just installed, go into Settings and then Storage, and then you'll see a screen where the second option is M.2 SSD storage. Scroll all the way down to the bottom on the left-hand side and select Installation Location. And once you're there, you can select both PS4 and PS5 games to be stored in the M.2 SSD storage. While you're in this menu, if you want to move games you already had installed on your PS5 to the new drive you just installed, go to the console storage page and you'll be presented with a list of all the games and apps currently installed on your PS5's built-in SSD. Once you're on that menu, you'll see a huge list of every game and app installed on your PS5, and then you basically just check the box of whatever you want to move, click move, and you're good to go. So with your Samsung 980 Pro installed into your console, you're gonna have a lot more storage for a lot more games, which is good because games are coming out left and right this fall, and a lot of them are definitely worth playing. Now, thanks to the fact that consoles are using SSDs now, the games themselves are getting a little bit smaller, but who's gonna say no to storing even more games on your console? There's nothing I hate more than having to delete a game to install a new one, and then a couple months later wanting to go and play it and realizing that I have to re-download the entire thing all over again. If you get a bigger SSD, you don't have to worry about that issue. Like, there's nothing worse than when a brand new DLC expansion comes out for a game and you really want to play it, so then you go onto your console and realize that you deleted the game a few months ago to make space for something else. So you download the base game, you buy the DLC expansion, and then you realize that on top of all the patches you need, you also need to download the game. It's just annoying, and if you have an SSD in your console, you will not have to deal with this anymore. Unless you somehow manage to fill it up, but let's be real, that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. Overall, this process is a lot less scary than it looks. I know the idea of popping a side plate off your brand new console that's extremely hard to get could be a little bit daunting, but you got to keep in mind that it was built to have this done to it. You're not doing anything crazy, you're not breaking the rules. That SSD slot in the PS5 was made to be accessed, and it's actually relatively simple to do, which if you followed through this video, you definitely just realized. On top of the fact that you're increasing your console's storage, which is just a good thing overall, this drive is a lot faster than the specs require on the PS5, so you're gonna see faster read and write speeds than the onboard storage of the console, which is sweet. It's also way faster than the onboard drive my PC shipped with, so that's why I have one in my PC. I install the games that I want to have the fastest loading times onto that drive because it's noticeably faster, and I love that. Anyway, hopefully you had fun installing a new SSD into your PS5, and if you want to pick up the Samsung 980 Pro, I'll have it linked down in the description. Anyway guys, that's all I have for you today, so make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications set to all. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.